Station Andronicus hung silent in the void, a vast and ancient construct that predated human expansion into the galaxy. It was a place where diplomats gathered to settle disputes, where treaties were hammered out, and where countless awkward banquets were held under the shadow of uneasy alliances. For Earth, it represented one of the few neutral grounds where the young United Nations of Sol could rub shoulders with the older and more powerful Galactic Empire. Ambassador Elena Markov had attended many such summits before, but this one felt different. Tensions had been high for months, trade negotiations had stalled, a skirmish between a Terran merchant fleet and an Imperial patrol near the asteroid belt of Vashari III had left dozens dead on both sides. Relations were sour, but not quite hostile. Earth's delegation came armed with reams of proposals and a desperate hope that some common ground could still be found. Elena brought her daughter, Lila, with her this time. It wasn't ideal. Station Andronicus wasn't exactly a child-friendly place, but the assignment had come suddenly, and the UN didn't give her time to arrange for care back home. At 6 years old, Lila was wide-eyed, curious and restless. She had never seen so many alien species gathered in one place, and she had spent most of the journey peppering her mother with questions. Do they all speak our language? Why do they wear those shiny suits? What's in that big room we passed? Elena tried to answer patiently, though her mind was already spinning with the challenges of the coming summit. On the third day, while Elena and her team huddled with Imperial negotiators in one of the station's labyrinthine conference chambers, Lila grew bored. She had her holo tablet and a stuffed animal to keep her company, but the novelty had worn off. The hallways of Station Andronicus seemed to call to her. Surely there were more things to see, more interesting aliens, more fascinating machines. She slipped out of the small side room she had been left in, unnoticed by the guards, and wandered, off in search of adventure. Station Andronicus was a sprawling, multi-tiered structure. Its levels were connected by wide, open stairways and crisscrossed by gravity lifts. Each section was marked with symbols and glyphs from half a dozen civilizations, and the soft, omnipresent hum of its ancient systems lent the place a strange, otherworldly atmosphere. Lila wandered through a long corridor lined with alien sculptures, past windows that opened out onto breathtaking views of star clusters. She had no idea she had wandered into a restricted zone. A pair of Imperial guards had stopped to chat nearby, their helmeted heads tilted toward each other. They glanced up when the little girl came skipping down the corridor, humming a nursery rhyme to herself. Their augmented visors scanned her in an instant, and alarms flickered silently on their heads-up displays. Unauthorized presence. Security breach. One of them called out sharply in a language she didn't understand. Lila stopped, looking puzzled. Her small hands clutched the stuffed animal tightly. The guards didn't wait. Following their protocols, they raised their weapons, which crackled ominously. They shouted again, but Lila was frozen in place, her wide eyes fixed on the glowing barrels. Her mouth opened, as if to ask a question. Before she could speak, a brilliant flare of light filled the hallway. The station's emergency klaxons wailed. Elena Markov was still in negotiations when she received the call. At first, it didn't register. The words of the security officer sounded surreal, impossible, but when she saw the footage, a cold, immovable weight settled in her chest. Her little girl, the one person who made all the late-night sessions and grueling travel worthwhile, was gone. The Empire had fired on a child who posed no threat, who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The news spread like wildfire. The Galactic Congress, which had long been critical of Earth's aggressive expansion, offered condolences but no censure. Imperial spokespeople insisted it was a tragic misunderstanding. It was a breach of security protocols, their statement read. We deeply regret the loss of life, but the safeguards in place acted as intended. To them, it was an unfortunate incident, nothing more. But to Earth, it was a spark. In an instant, the veneer of diplomatic restraint cracked and fell away. Public outrage surged across human space. Protesters gathered outside embassies on Luna, on Mars, on Earth itself. Military leaders began quietly recalling reserve fleets. The Earth's media circulated Lila's photograph endlessly, her bright smile, her favorite stuffed animal clutched in her arms. The headlines grew more incendiary with each passing day. Imperial cowards kill a child. This cannot stand. Time to show them who we are. Within a week, the United Nations of Sol held an emergency session. President Samuel Reed, a normally stoic man, took the podium and addressed the assembly with a fire in his voice that hadn't been heard since the days of Earth's unification wars. "They killed one of our children," he declared. "They took from us something that cannot be replaced. We will not let them dismiss her life as an accident. We will make them see. We will make them pay." As humanity's fleets began to mobilize, no one yet realized that this single terrible incident would ignite the bloodiest war the galaxy had ever known. When the broadcast came through, no one on Earth was prepared for the magnitude of rage it would unleash. News networks streamed it live. The footage of Lila Markov's death looped endlessly, her terrified face frozen in time, the cold, mechanical precision of the Imperial security drones seared into every viewer's memory. Even the most skeptical citizens, those who had questioned Earth's role in galactic politics, who had advocated for peace, found themselves consumed by anger. In the cities of Earth, the mood was electric. Massive crowds filled squares and avenues, holding candles and chanting Lila's name. Memorials sprang up overnight, her image projected onto skyscrapers, her face gazing down from digital billboards. Artists painted murals, musicians composed. Tributes and playwrights penned dramas that portrayed her as a martyr for humanity's pride and survival. A single child's death had become a rallying cry, a symbol of all the injustices Earth felt it had endured at the hands of the older galactic powers. Lila's name was invoked at the United Nations of Sol Emergency Assembly, where heated debates turned into shouts. "This is not just a diplomatic incident," thundered Representative Ebo from the African bloc. "This is an act of brutality. The Empire does not see us as equals, only as nuisances to be crushed. If we allow this to pass unchallenged, we admit that they are right." The resolution to mobilize was passed by an overwhelming majority. Within hours, orders went out. Earth's entire industrial base shifted gears. The shipyards of Luna, which had been producing exploratory vessels and orbital habitats, were retooled to build dreadnoughts, carriers, and squadrons of nimble destroyers. The factories of Mars, long focused on terraforming equipment, now churned out armor, munitions, and infantry exosuits. Even the asteroid mining operations of the Belt were pressed into service, their output redirected toward military production. The media worked tirelessly to shape public opinion. Every channel carried messages of unity and defiance. "They killed her for nothing," said the newscasters, their voices trembling with righteous fury. "They murdered a child, and now they will see the cost of their arrogance." Every citizen was reminded daily of Earth's historic struggles. The wars of unification, the survival of the climate crisis, the triumph over early space colonization challenges. Humanity had always fought back against impossible odds, and this time would be no different. Volunteers poured into recruiting stations. They came from all walks of life: farmers from the green plains of Australia, engineers from the floating platforms above Venus, workers from the icy mining stations of Europa. Even those who had never considered military service felt the call. Lila Markov's name was on everyone's lips, a talisman of what had been lost and what could never happen again. The Martian Free States, long divided on their relationship with Earth, saw their public opinion shift overnight. The murder of a child was too much, even for their separatist leaders. Martian shipyards pledged their services. Their orbital defense platforms were integrated into Earth's naval command, and their skilled pilots joined the swelling Terran fleets. It was the first time in decades that Earth and Mars had stood together under a single banner. A grim sense of purpose spread across the United Nations of Souls leadership. President Samuel Reed, standing in the cavernous Hall of Nations in Geneva, addressed the world in a speech that would be remembered for generations. "We are not starting a war," he declared. "The war has already been started, by those who believe we are lesser, by those who believe they can take from us without consequence. I say to the Empire, you have made a grave mistake. You have awakened something in humanity that you will not soon forget." The first Earth fleets began deploying. The Armstrong battle group set out from Luna's shipyards, its sleek destroyers gleaming under the harsh light of the sun. The Da Vinci carrier, Strike Force, launched from the massive orbital platforms of Mars, loaded with squadrons of experimental fighters. Across the belt, industrial stations went silent as their ore haulers were converted into makeshift supply ships, ready to fuel the coming war machine. What no one fully realized, what perhaps even the leaders of Earth failed to grasp, was how profoundly the murder of one child had unified an entire species. Earth's people, who had spent centuries bickering and struggling amongst themselves, now moved with a singular purpose. Humanity had a long memory, and its wrath was not easily extinguished. The Galactic Empire had dismissed Lila Markov's death as a minor incident, a regrettable footnote. They had no idea what they had unleashed. War came like a wildfire, fast and unrelenting. The galaxy, accustomed to careful diplomacy and the occasional border skirmish, had never seen anything like the full might of humanity turned outward. Earth's newly unified fleets moved with astonishing precision, striking at weak points along the Imperial frontier. The first assault began at Arcanis Station, a critical supply depot that funneled resources from the Empire's inner worlds to its border territories. Earth's intelligence, bolstered by a network of embedded agents and newly developed stealth probes, pinpointed the station's vulnerabilities. Under the cover of the system's dense asteroid belt, the Armstrong battle group advanced. It was a textbook operation. Coordinated fighter squadrons harassed the station's automated defenses, while Earth's destroyers disabled the massive orbital platforms. In less than 6 hours, the station was in flames, its reserves of helium-3 and exotic alloys spilling uselessly into space. Victory after victory followed. The Empire, for all its power and influence, was unprepared for the speed and ferocity of Earth's attacks. Many of its frontier worlds had grown complacent after centuries of relative peace. Earth exploited this weakness, striking hard and fast before Imperial reinforcements could arrive. In the first month, they captured 3 systems, pushing the Empire back on its heels. But the Empire was far from beaten. As the initial shock wore off, it began to mobilize its own massive fleets. Imperial battle cruisers, bristling with state-of-the-art weaponry, made their presence known. At the Battle of Vepria, an Imperial task force cornered an Earth convoy, attempting to resupply the front lines. Earth's ships fought valiantly, but the sheer firepower of the Empire's dreadnoughts was too much. The loss of the convoy, and the lives aboard it, marked Earth's first major defeat. Yet instead of breaking Earth's resolve, the defeat at Vepria steeled it. Earth's command realized it could not match the Empire ship for ship or gun for gun. They turned to innovation. The factories on Luna began churning out modular strike craft, fast, maneuverable ships designed to swarm enemy capital vessels and exploit weak points in their defenses. Mars unveiled new railgun platforms capable of firing kinetic projectiles at near relativistic speeds, devastating even the most heavily armored Imperial ships. Earth's scientists developed AI-directed drone swarms that operated autonomously, overwhelming Imperial formations with sheer numbers. Earth's admirals adopted a strategy of guerrilla warfare on a cosmic scale. They would not stand toe-to-toe with the Empire's vast fleets in open battle. Instead, they struck where the Empire least expected, undermining supply lines, crippling shipyards, and ambushing isolated patrol groups. The Empire's response was to tighten its grip, launching brutal crackdowns on contested systems and declaring martial law in dozens of border colonies. This heavy-handed approach only fueled resistance. Human sympathizers emerged even within Imperial space, sabotaging supply depots and feeding intelligence back to Earth's high command. As the war dragged into its second year, the galaxy was in chaos. Refugees from devastated systems flooded into neutral zones, overwhelming local authorities. Trade routes that had been stable for centuries were now battlegrounds. Neutral worlds tried to broker peace, but the talks never lasted. Earth's leaders would not entertain a truce, while Imperial worlds refused to admit guilt for Lila Markov's death. The Empire, unwilling to show weakness, continued to dismiss Earth's demands as unreasonable. With neither side willing to yield, the conflict spiraled further out of control. On Earth itself, the war was reshaping society. The once fractious human nations were now bound together by a shared purpose. Economies boomed as the demand for war materials skyrocketed. Technological breakthroughs accelerated at a staggering pace, faster than light communications, advanced medical treatments for injured soldiers, and improved energy systems all emerged as humanity pushed itself to the brink in the name of survival. But there was a cost. The human colonies closest to the front lines bore the brunt of Imperial retaliation. Planets like New Carthage and Halcyon Prime, which had once been bustling centers of trade and culture, were reduced to rubble under orbital bombardments. Civilians suffered, families were torn apart, and for every victory Earth's navy claimed, there were 3 new reports of devastating losses elsewhere. The war in the void was no longer about strategy or borders. It was about proving who would endure. The Galactic Empire was a giant, but giants are slow to adapt. Earth, still small and scrappy by galactic standards, fought like a cornered animal, vicious, cunning, and relentless. The galaxy watched as the conflict escalated, and neutral powers began to wonder if they would be next. By the end of the 3rd year, neither side was the same. The Empire's once unshakable confidence was giving way to frustration and infighting. Some of its member worlds began to question the wisdom of continued hostilities. On Earth, the once idealistic speeches about justice and unity were increasingly replaced by grim determinations to simply outlast the enemy. The galaxy's balance of power was shifting, and it was clear that the war had gone far beyond the death of a single child. It had become a crucible, reshaping the destiny of both humanity and the Empire, with no end in sight. The war had burned for 5 long years, leaving scars across countless star systems. Entire worlds were reduced to smoldering ruins, their populations scattered or obliterated. Trade routes that had once carried goods and technology between civilizations were now the hunting grounds of roaming fleets. In the neutral zones, clusters of refugee ships formed makeshift colonies, drifting aimlessly as they sought safe harbor. The conflict had spiraled far beyond what any side had anticipated, least of all the Galactic Empire, which had once dismissed humanity as a minor annoyance. On Earth, the once celebrated cause of vengeance for Lila Markov was now a quiet ache, a name spoken softly in homes and schools rather than trumpeted on propaganda networks. The war's original outrage had faded into a bitter resolve. Victory was no longer about pride or justice, it was about survival. Earth's industrial base was stretched to its limits, and its population bore the heavy burden of a total war. Economy, food rationing, endless work shifts, and a relentless stream of bad news became the new normal. Still, humanity refused to break. The Galactic Empire, for its part, was faltering. Though its fleet was vast and its resources immense, the strain of fighting a determined and highly adaptive enemy was beginning to show. Imperial member worlds, long accustomed to luxury and stability, were growing restless. Governors complained that vital trade shipments were weeks overdue. Merchants whispered of rebellion on the outlying planets. Even the Empire's core worlds, bastions of power and culture, began to feel the effects of Earth's unorthodox tactics. Earth's daring raids, like the infamous strike on the Velkar prime shipyards, not only devastated Imperial supply lines, but also eroded the Empire's aura of invincibility. By the 6th year, both sides were teetering. High-ranking officials, on Earth and within the Empire, began exploring options for peace, though neither side was willing to show weakness. Earth demanded not just reparations, but an official acknowledgement of guilt and justice for the officers responsible for Lila's death. The Empire, pride wounded and desperate to maintain its dominance, refused to apologize outright, but offered financial settlements and autonomy for certain human colonies. Negotiations stalled repeatedly. The Galactic Congress convened emergency sessions, but the delegates found themselves impotent. The galaxy's highest body, meant to mediate disputes and prevent war, had become little more than a stage for bitter recriminations. It was not some dramatic battle or single pivotal event that brought about the end. Instead, it was exhaustion. The Empire's coffers ran dry. Earth's factories began failing under the relentless demand, and most importantly, both sides faced growing unrest at home. Protests erupted on Earth's colonies, with citizens demanding an end to the endless conscription and rationing. On Imperial worlds, separatist movements gained traction, fueled by the perception that the Empire had squandered its strength on a war of pride against a single species. In the 8th year of the war, the first real peace summit convened on Station Andronicus, ironically the same place where it had all begun. Both sides arrived haggard and wary. Earth's representatives, older and grayer, spoke with the weight of incalculable loss behind them. The Empire's delegation, once so haughty and disdainful, carried the look of a people who had been humbled by years of brutal conflict. The negotiations were long and fraught, but the shared exhaustion finally overcame the pride and bitterness. The final terms were harsh for both sides. The Empire paid steep reparations, surrendered several contested systems, and agreed to limited accountability for the officers involved in the original incident. Earth, in turn, agreed to demilitarize portions of its navy and open key trade routes. The galaxy would not be the same. The balance of power had shifted. Humanity, once dismissed as a minor player, now stood as a proven force, its resilience a warning to anyone who might dare challenge it again. For the survivors on both sides, the war's end was not so much a celebration as a relief. Earth's cities slowly returned to normalcy. Factories switched back to producing civilian goods. Families were reunited, though many more remained fractured forever. On Imperial worlds, discontent lingered, but there was also a growing recognition of the need for reform. The peace was fragile, but it was peace nonetheless, and through it all the memory of Lila Markov endured. She became a figure of legend, her story taught in schools as a cautionary tale about the cost of unchecked arrogance and the power of unity in the face of tragedy. In the centuries that followed, the galaxy remembered her not just as a victim of a terrible war, but as the spark that changed the course of human history forever.